Üsküdar'a giderken alnına bir yağmur, Üsküdar'a giderken alnına bir yağmur, Katibimin setresi uzun eteği çamur, Katibimin setresi uzun eteği çamur, Katip uykudan uyanmış gözleri mahmur, Katip uykudan uyanmış gözleri mahmur, Katip benim ben katibin elle karışır, Katibime kolumda gömlek bir güzel yaraşır. Üsküdar'a giderken bilmem bir oldum, Üsküdar'a giderken bilmem bir oldum, mendilimin içine lokum doldurdum, mendilimin içine lokum doldurdum, Katibimi ararken yanımda buldum, Katibimi ararken yanımda buldum, Katip benim ben katibin elle karışır, Katibime kolumda gömlek ne güzel yaraşır, Katip benim ben katibin elle karışır, Katibime kolumda gömlek ne güzel yaraşır.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין, בריח אורנים, נישא ברוח הערביים עם כל פעמונים. ובתרדמת אילן באבן, שבויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. איכה יבשו בורות המים, כיכר השוק ריקה, ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע והלילות רוחות, ואין יורד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. אך בבואי היום לשיר אלך ולך לקשור כתרים, מצעיר בנייך ומאחרוני המשוררים. כי שמך צורב את השפתיים, כי נשיקת שרף. אם אשכחך ירושלים, אשר כולה זהב. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. חזרנו אל בורות המים, לשוק ולכיכר, שופר קורא בהר הבית, בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע, אלפי שמשות זורחות, נשוב נרד אל ים המלח, בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור.
Aşk bahçemi süsleyen inci çiçeğim misin? Aşk bahçemi süsleyen inci çiçeğim misin?
Gecemi aydınlatan ateş böceğim misin?
Gecemi aydınlatan ateş böceğim misin? Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan. Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan.
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin?
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin? Bahar dalında yaprak yıldızdan daha parlak. Bahar dalında yaprak yıldızdan daha parlak.
Gözyaşımdan yuvarlak ateş böceğim misin?
Gözyaşımdan yuvarlak ateş böceğim misin? Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan. Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan.
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin?
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin? Doğmayan güneşimsin, rüyalarda eşimsin. Doğmayan güneşimsin, rüyalarda eşimsin.
Sevgilim söyler misin? Ateş böceğim misin?
Sevgilim söyler misin? Ateş böceğim misin? Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan. Gençlik başımda duman, ilk aşkım ilk heyecan.
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin?
Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin? Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin? Kovaladıkça kaçan ateş böceğim misin?
Değdi saçlarıma bahar küleği, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştü. Her erin bahtına bir güzel düşer. Sen de tek benim yadıma düştün, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştün. Sen de tek benim yadıma düştün, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştün. Sensiz dağ döşüne çıktım bu seher. Öttü kumru gibi gülşen laleler. Besniye yalgısın sordular ele. Böyledir üzgünüm yadıma düştüm, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştü. Böyledir üzgünüm yadıma düştüm, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştü. Gözlerim yoldadır, kulağım seste. Seni unutmaram ben son nefeste. Ey ceylan bakışım, ey boyu destan. Ey taze sevdiğim yadıma düştün, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştün. Ey taze sevdiğim yadıma düştün, nazende sevdiğim yadıma düştün.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכה קר, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, ואתה ואת.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, broadcasting to you today from Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim. I still have a bit of a cold. I think it may be COVID. I don't know. I don't care. Hopefully it'll go away. But at any rate, we're going to do the Torah study. We're going to continue in the book of Leviticus, but I'm going to have to cut it a bit short because at 5 o'clock p.m. Jerusalem time, which translates into 3 o'clock p.m. Lisbon time, which translates into 10 o'clock a.m. New York time. I'm going to have to go because I'm invited to a Suda Shlishit. I'm invited to a meal here in Jerusalem with someone that I knew from many years ago, and I keep on running into people. Shabbat Shalom, Jasmine. And I keep on running into people that I knew many years ago in Jerusalem. So in around an hour and a half, I'm going to stop the broadcast and take off and go to the Suda Shlishit meal, because that's what Shabbat is all about. Okay, so I've spent the past week in Jerusalem. I arrived here, more than a week. Today is Shabbat day. Today's Saturday. I arrived here not this past Thursday, the Thursday before. So I've spent about 10 days in Yerushalayim. And many of those days, most of those days, I guess, I've spent exploring archaeological finds. A lot of them in and around the Temple Mount, and it has been absolutely fascinating. And I think one of the main things I've realized is that I've really just scratched the surface, because every time I think I've seen the archaeological sites in and around the Temple Mount, someone says, "Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one." I just found out about a new cave that they excavated recently, I guess in recent years, or opened in recent years, they're calling it Hezekiah's Cave. If I have time, I'll go. Excuse me. You're gonna have to excuse me for the coughing and sniffling this week. I'll go explore it tomorrow, and maybe I'll do a couple of videos about it. But I went up to, and I did some videos on this. I was up in the Mount of Olives. I'm staying up in the Mount of Olives, and then went down into the Kidron Valley, up to the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. So the eastern wall of the Temple Mount also forms the eastern wall of the city of Jerusalem, and it's from, at least the bottom part of it is from Herodian times, from the time of Herod the Great. Herod reigned from, if I remember the dates correctly, 4 BCE till 20 CE. Don't quote me on that one, but Shabbat Shalom Nathanael. And so that whole eastern, so the temple, what King Herod did is he greatly expanded the second temple that was rebuilt in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. That was essentially built by Nehemiah. And I think they dated, again, if my numbers are correct, 510 BCE approximately to approximately 500 BCE. And so it sat as a very modest temple until Herod's reign. And then Herod wanted to impress the world, I guess, and also maybe impress the Jews, because his Jewish lineage was in doubt, shall we say. and so he greatly expanded. He greatly expanded the building of. He greatly expanded the temple, and one of the things he did in order to do this was he built a retaining wall around Mount Moriah on 4 sides to hold in all of his construction. So what is a retaining wall? It's a wall that holds the dirt in so it doesn't all slide. Excuse me. Down the mountains into the surrounding valleys. Like I said, I'm sorry I have a cold, so you just have to bear with that. I'm bearing with it, so you guys will have to bear with it. But so he built these retaining walls around Mount Moriah, and one of those retaining walls, the western wall, is what we call today the Western Wall. It's part of the western retaining wall, but there are another 4 walls. There's the southern wall, there's the northern wall, and there's the eastern wall. And there are archaeological finds all around these 4 walls. So I first focused on the eastern wall, went up to something called they call it the Golden Gate. In Hebrew, they call it Shara Rachamim. It's a double gate on the eastern side, according to rabbinical tradition. I think it does have basis, if I remember, from Ezekiel chapter 44. Maybe we could find that very briefly. Let me see. Let's see how we're going to do this. Torah. No, I won't look at it. Well, let's see. Ezekiel chapter 44. Just give me 1 second here. Is it 44? I have to see if my memory serves me correct. 4. Yeah, right at the beginning of Ezekiel 44. So it says, so this is Ezekiel. The end of Ezekiel is the prophecy for the restoration of Jerusalem and the 3rd temple at the end of days. And it says, I won't post it because we're not doing a formal study right now. We're just starting. So it says, you could follow along, Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 1. Then the man brought me back. So Ezekiel's being shown a vision of the temple in the end of days. Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. So it says the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. Well, it doesn't say the eastern gate of the retaining wall. It says the eastern gate of the sanctuary. So that would obviously imply the sanctuary courtyard. However, that eastern gate that's being spoken about here may very well be that same eastern gate that's in that outer retaining wall that was built by Herod the Great, because there was an archaeologist, I believe his name is Lean Rittmeyer, if I'm not mistaken. You can look up his work, who excavated or explored in that general area, and he saw evidence for underneath the gate that's there now, which is clearly from Herodian times, or maybe even post-Herodian times. Underneath it was found the remnants of an older gate, which he dated to the times of Solomon. So that older gate that's underneath, or this new gate, this eastern gate, it's a double arch gate. There's one arch, and then next to it is another arch. Below it may very well be in the same place where this gate that's being spoken about right now, or that we're reading about right now in Ezekiel chapter 44, was. So at any rate, then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. Yahweh said to me, the gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened. And in fact, today it's shut. It's been blocked up. I can't remember who blocked it up. I think it was the Muslims. Again, don't quote me on it. No one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because Yahweh, the God of Israel, has entered through it. The prince himself, meaning that is a reference to the Messiah in the end of days, the restored king from the Davidic line, from the Davidic dynasty. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of Yahweh. He is to enter by way of the portico of the gateway and go out the same way. Okay, so this is basically saying that the the only one who's to enter and exit that gate is to be the descendant of David. In other words, what we would call, oh shoot, what's going on here? Why is this frozen? Okay, I'm back, I think. The only one who's to enter and exit that gate, although you can interpret this in a number of different ways, you really have to study it, but the only one who's to enter and exit that gate is what we would call the Messiah. I really hate to use the word Messiah. I like to use the descendant of King David, who will be king over Israel, but okay, because Messiah is such a loaded word in so many different religions. But at any rate, and let me post this actually. I'll post it in the comment. This is Ezekiel 44:1. Let's see if that goes. There we go. Okay. It's cutting my face off, but oh well. So the prophecy seems to basically be saying that only the quote unquote Messiah is to enter and exit this gate, and that will happen in the end of days. And until then, it's to be blocked up. And in fact, if this is the same gate from Solomonic times, or if it's above the gate from the times of Solomon, then it is blocked up to this day. You can actually go, you can approach it. You can get very close to it. And of course, me being the adventurous rebel that I am, there's a little fence around the gate, and I actually went through a hole in the fence and started just touching the gate and exploring the different bricks there to see if I could find any bricks that looked like they might be from the first temple period, because the bricks from the first temple period have a very distinct kind of shape to them. They have a certain border or boss around them, and they're very rough in the middle. And I thought I found some that might be down at the bottom. At any rate, the point is that this is where this legend arises from, and it's also a legend in other religions as well. The Muslims also believe that this is the gate that will be, I guess, the Messiah, or that will be used in the end of days. They associate it also with the end of days, and they've built a graveyard all along the wall there. So if you walk all along the eastern wall, you'll see there's a Muslim graveyard basically abutting the eastern wall, and also abutting this gate, this golden gate, or the Shara Rachamim, or this eastern gate. And I've heard two explanations as to why. Let me get rid of this because it really looks like I'm looking over like a steering wheel or something like that. Okay, and I've heard two explanations as to why. The first explanation is that the Muslims also consider it important for the end of days, so they put the graveyards there because they are also waiting for the end of day Messiah, the Mahdi, as they call it. And the other explanation I heard is that they put the graves there because they want to block the Jewish Messiah from coming back and entering and exit that gate. So at any rate, it's really fascinating stuff. I also explored, there's something called the Davidson Archaeological Park. It basically covers most of most of the southern wall of the Temple Mount, also the built in Herodian times, and a little bit of the Western Wall, the part of the Western Wall that people don't really know about, not the part they pray at, but the part of the Western Wall where there's an arch called Robinson's Arch from Second Temple period times, etc., etc. The point is, if you're ever in Israel, there's so much archaeological exploration to do. There's so many places where you can see archaeology from the Second Temple period and even the First Temple period. There's something up in the Old City which you don't have to enter any special area. They called Hezekiah's Wall, or the Broad Wall, which many archaeologists connect to the protection of Jerusalem during the time of Hezekiah, against the invading army of the Syrians, led by the king of Assyria, Sancheriv. Any rate, there's so much amazing archaeological stuff to be explored in and around the old city of Jerusalem. Oh my God, I hate this cold. And the Temple Mount that I highly recommend. I highly recommend doing it. So come to Israel, come to Jerusalem, come to Israel, and take part of this. And maybe if we do one of these days a World Alliance of Qara'im tour, then we'll definitely check out these places. Okay, in terms of the community, come to Israel. We are trying to start a live World Alliance of Qara'im community in Katsurin in the Golan Heights. So come, move to Israel. If you're already in Israel, move up to Katsurin in the Golan Heights. If you're not in Israel, make Aliyah and then move up to Katsurin in the Golan Heights, and we can have a live, an actual live World Alliance of Qara'im community. And hopefully I'll get rid of this cold by then. Okay, the other thing I wanted to speak about briefly before we get into this week's Torah study. By the way, can you guys all hear me okay? Can you guys all hear me and see me okay? I just want to do a sound check because things seem to be kind of a little bit jumpy over here, but let's just do a quick sound check. Can you hear me? Somebody let me know. How's the sound? How's the video? You never know. Internet is always a problem. Anybody? All right. I'll assume it's okay unless somebody tells me otherwise. Okay. The other thing I wanted to speak about was the new moon. So we observed, I didn't personally observe the new moon. I was in Yerushalayim last night and I was looking for the new moon, but couldn't find it. It was a difficult sighting in Yerushalayim because there was some cloud cover on the western horizon. But our friend David Chain, as you can see in the new moon report, if you haven't gotten the new moon report, then you should. You should be, I don't like to say should. I don't like to tell people what to do, but you can join our WhatsApp group, the Biblical Calendar Society WhatsApp group. I'll post the link right now. Just give me a second. Here it is. I posted in the comments. Okay, so you can pick it up there. Oh my God, this cold. Ugh. I really think colds should be outlawed. They should be banned. Okay, at any rate, so if you're part of the WhatsApp group or if you're on the Biblical Calendar Society Facebook group, then you will have gotten the report about the new moon sighting last night. And it was indeed sighted by our good friend David Chain up in the Haifa area and other people around the country. But David Chain's sighting was very precise. He mentioned that he could clearly see the moon, even though it was, well, I'll read his exact words so I don't distort. Let's see here. According to David Chain, the sighting was very easy because there were no clouds and Venus provided a clear reference. Even though the moon was low on the horizon and in the haze, it was clearly visible with my naked eye. Okay, so it was definitely a clear sighting, and that combined with other sightings from other groups, I check in on other groups as well, allowed us to declare the new moon, the new month to start last night, and hence Yom Teruah to be last night and today. So Yom Teruah is right now. As we speak, we are in Yom Teruah. Okay, started last night and ends tonight at full darkness, at what they call nightfall. Okay, so that's the dates for the holidays, and I'll publish a full schedule. I'll publish a full calendar, but very briefly, the next holiday. So Yom Teruah started last night at the sunset, concludes tonight at nightfall, at total darkness. Excuse me, at maximal darkness. And that means that Yom Kippurim, which is going to be the next Chag, which is going to be the next festival, will start on Sunday, October 13th at sunset and last until Monday, October 14th at maximal darkness, or what they call nightfall. Okay. An interesting thing about the new moon this month, and I did send out also to the Biblical Calendar Society, I also sent out a little note about this, was that it was not clear. We had a very interesting situation. So first of all, even last night, with the moon being sighted on last night, Friday night, it was 2 days later than rabbinical Yom Teruah, what they call Rosh Hashanah. So when rabbinical Rosh Hashanah ended, oh my God, I really hate this. When rabbinical Rosh Hashanah ended, our Karaite, or our biblical Yom Teruah, began. Okay, and this is kind of rare. It's not impossible, but it is rare that this. It's somewhat rare. It happens maybe off the top of my head, maybe about 10% of the time, 15% of the time, that there's a 2-day difference between the rabbinical calendar and the biblical calendar in terms of setting the new month. Oh my God, it's giving me a headache. But also, what was interesting about last night's sighting is that it was the end of the 29th day since the previous sighting, or shall I say it was the end of the 30th day. No, it was the end of the 29th. It was the end of the 29th day since the previous sighting. It was the beginning of the 30th day, or I'm going to get myself confused. I'm going to get you confused. Basically, it was the beginning of the 31st day since the previous sighting. Okay, and what that means is we have a rule that we usually follow, which is if the moon is not sighted at the beginning of the 30th day, the end of the 29th day, the beginning of the 30th day. I'm sorry, if it's not sighted at the end of the 30th day, the beginning of the 31st day, then it's declared automatically by default. Okay, why is that? It's because the average synodic period of the moon is 29.5 days. What does that mean? Without getting really technical, it means that the time from one new moon, one astronomical new moon, to another astronomical new moon, or one full moon to the next astronomical full moon, or one quarter moon to the next astronomical quarter moon, is as viewed from the Earth, is on average approximately 29 and a half days. Okay, so if at the end of the 29, if at the end of the 30-day period, okay, we haven't viewed the moon, the beginning of the 31st day, then it's automatically declared. Okay, because the reasoning being that if we couldn't see it, then it must have been because of some kind of cloud cover or some kind of other meteorological phenomenon, and it would have been visible had that cloud cover not been there. So it's automatically declared as the new moon. That's called the default, the 30-day default rule. Okay. However, this is not a cut and dried rule, and I'll just explain very briefly. Okay. So we said that the average synodic period of the moon, and I'll just say the time from one new moon to the next new moon, one astronomical new moon to the next astronomical new moon, is 29.5 days. But that's an average. It can be less and it can be more. It can be anywhere from about 29.2 days to about 29.8 days. Okay. So, and on top of that, when we see the visible new moon, we're not always seeing it in exactly the same phase each month. It could be in a slightly earlier phase. It can have lower illumination. It could be in a slightly higher phase. It can have higher illumination. And the reason for that is that it it depends on a bunch of factors, but it basically depends on how far away in time we are when we are able to see the new moon from when the astronomical new moon occurred. It gets a bit complicated. I'm not going to get into all the details right now, but the basic bottom line is that although the 30-day rule is usually held by, it's not a cut and dried rule. There can be cases where even after the end of 30 days, that that the new moon, even if there were no cloud cover, would not be visible. And when would that happen? That would happen if the synodic period that month, from the previous month to the current new moon, is long. So in other words, it's higher than the average. It's not 29.5 days, but it's say 29.8 days. And when in the previous new moon, we happen to see the visible new moon when it was at a very low illumination, meaning it was at an earlier phase. Let me see if I can drink. and maybe that'll help a bit. So the bottom line is that the time from the previous visible new moon to this visible new moon could actually exceed those 30 days and could stretch out into the next day. Oh my God. And it's very possible that we would have had such a case this month if the new moon had not been sighted. So I had a dilemma, or we at the Biblical Calendar Society had a dilemma. If the new moon was not sighted last night, do we go by the 30-day default rule, or do we wait another day and actually allow the previous month to last 31 days and ignore the 30-day default rule? And we had decided that we would actually be ready to ignore the 30-day default rule if there was a clear view of the western horizon, and if the moon was not visible, and if there were enough observers to verify or to imply the idea that the moon was not visible. Okay. And the reason for this would have been that the moon was at a very low illumination. It was very early in its it was in a very early phase after astronomical new moon last night, and there entirely was a chance that it would not have been viewed, that it would not have been seen, and not because of cloud cover, but because it just was at too low an illumination, a percentage of illumination, to be visible by the naked eye. We weren't sure, but however, there were people that saw it, as I mentioned. So we did declare the new moon, the new month, to be last night, and declared Yom Teruah to be last night. And so we didn't have to violate the 30-day rule because it was actually visible last night. But I think we were ready to, because it was a very borderline case. Oh my God, this is really horrible. I really hate this cold. All right, so that's all I have to say about that. Any comments, any questions before we go on? Anybody? I'm really sorry about the cold. If you think I'm sorry that you guys have to listen to it, I'm really sorry that I have to experience it. It's really horrible, to be honest. But hopefully I'll get over it soon. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on? Anybody? Can you guys hear me? Can I get a sound check, please? At least somebody give me a sound check. Somebody just type in a Y to let me know that you can hear me. Yeah, I'll rest. Okay. All right. So we're going to go now back to, I'll do a shorter study today. That's the way I'll rest. It really stinks. I actually think, I never took the COVID shot or any of that crap. And I think when I was still in Portugal last February or January, I got a cold that I'd never experienced anything like it before. It may very well have been COVID. I have no idea. I never got myself checked or tested or anything. Yeah, I'm seeing your comments, Marianne, or anything like that, but it may very well have been. And then this may be a recurrence of that. I think they call it long COVID or something like that. I don't know. I hope it passes. It's really, 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 really unpleasant. Okay. Anyway, let's go to Leviticus. And we're in Leviticus chapter 19. And I'm going to share the screen. Onion, garlic, and lemon in hot tea. Sounds good to me. All right, so let me share the screen here. Thank you, Marianne. Okay. And we're going to dig into Leviticus chapter 19. So we were, let's see where we were. Yeah, we had dealt with this very difficult halakha. I'm just reading in English. Okay. This very difficult law, which it's not clear what it was. If a man sleeps with a female slave who is promised to another man, but has not been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment. Yet They are not to be put to death because she has not been freed. The man, however, must bring a ram to the entrance to the tent of meeting for a guilt offering to Yahweh. With the ram of the guilt offering, the priest is to make atonement for him before Yahweh for the sin he has committed, and his sin will be forgiven. Okay, so we're not going to rehash that. It was a bit difficult. It was unclear exactly what it means. I gave my opinion in the end of what I thought it means, but it definitely far from conclusive. So let's move on. We're going to start now in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 23. We're going to talk about something called Orlah. And let me just bring up Robert Alter and all these guys. Oh, man. Really sucks. Box. That's usually enough to go on. Okay. So Leviticus 19. Let's bring it up here. Oh my God. I'm really sorry. I apologize. Okay, so it's page 987. Okay. And we are in verse 23, right? Okay. Verse 23. Okay, so all right, let's switch over to Hebrew. Okay. Bigger for the audience. Okay, we're in verse 23. V'chi tavo el haaretz u nit'atem kol etz ma'achal ve'arlatem ve'arlatem or lato et pirio. Okay, I'll read to the rest. Shalosh shanim yihye lachem arlelim lo ye'achel. Okay, so when you come on, let me translate it literally and then we'll talk about it. Okay, when you come into the land and you plant any kind of fruit tree or any kind of literally tree for food tree. Oh my God. Arratam arlato. Arratem orlato. Okay, you shall literally leave it uncircumcised is the word that's being used here. And we'll talk about it in a second. Okay. Pirio. I'm sorry, let me read this again. Arlatem orlato pirio. So you shall let me just see how to translate here to get a bit translation. Yeah, you shall keep it as uncircumcised or keep its fruit as uncircumcised. Okay, so when you enter into the land of Israel and you plant a fruit tree, you shall keep its fruit as uncircumcised. Okay, shalosh shanim yeh lachem arelim lo yechel. So for 3 years, it should be for you as uncircumcised. It shall not be eaten. Okay. So we're going to talk about what that means. But let's go on to verse 24. A little bigger so I can see that. Oh, I'm not sharing. Why? Oh, I am sharing. Okay. Verse 24. Lashana ha-revi'ith ye'eh kol pirio kodesh hilulim le-Yahweh. And in the 4th year, all of its fruits shall be holy. They shall be hilulim. They shall be honored or praise to Yahweh. In other words, we'll talk about what that means. Okay. Verse 25. Verse 25. Verse 25. ובשנה חמישית תאכלו את פריו, להוסיף לכם תבואתו, אני יהוה אלוהיכם. And in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, which may be added to your produce, which may be part of your produce or added to your produce. Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh your God. Again, we see, as we see often in this, what we spoke about, the Holiness Code from Leviticus 17 through 26, this Ani Yahweh, or Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh your God. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, so for 3 years, the tree is to be considered as uncircumcised. Okay. These fruits, pirio shalosh shanim ye'eh lechem arelim. Okay, these fruits shall be considered as if they're uncircumcised, lo ye'achel. Okay, so uncircumcised means that it's not yet, shall we say, well, what do we know from circumcision? We know that someone who's uncircumcised, an Israelite that's uncircumcised, is not part of the covenant. Okay, when a person is circumcised, he's on the 8th day. A male we're talking about is supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth, and then that's his way of being brought into the covenant. That's the sign on his flesh that he's now brought into the covenant. So when we're saying that the fruits of the trees, and let me just see one thing. Oh my God. And so the fruits of the trees are to be considered uncircumcised for the first 3 years after the tree is planted. Okay. In other words, they're considered as if they're not part of the covenant. Okay. They're not brought into the covenant. They're not, can we use the word kosher? I don't like the word kosher because it's a completely different concept. Okay. But they haven't been brought somehow into the, figuratively speaking, into the covenant, and therefore they cannot be considered part of the plants, or part of the fruits, or part of the tevuah, part of the produce of the land of Israel, which is acceptable to be eaten. Okay. On the 4th year, okay, kol pirio kodesh hilulim le Yahweh. So all of its fruit are made holy. When something is made holy, that means it's set aside or it's dedicated to Yahweh. Here it says hilulim. That would come from the underlying word halel. Halel means halel means to praise. So hilulim would mean a praise, or set aside as an honor, or set aside as a praise to Yahweh. We'll translate it that way. Okay. So the fourth produce year, okay, the 4th year that the tree produces fruit, then those fruits are set aside. They're not to be eaten by the ordinary people. When something's set aside as kodesh, then it goes to the Kohanim or the Levites. Okay, and then in verse 25 it says, let me this up a little bit. In verse 25, then we see only in the 5th year may you eat its fruit, and may be added to your produce, to the bounty of the land of Israel. Ani Yahweh Elohechem. Okay, so we have this idea. To make a long story short, we have this idea that when new fruit trees are planted, and by the way, it's not talking about fruit trees that have already been planted in the past. When you come into the land, you plant new fruit trees. For 3 years, you do not do anything with the fruit. Okay, you don't eat the fruit. It's considered maybe too young or not brought into the covenant, or however you want to look at it. On the 4th year, then that's kind of a first fruits offering to Yahweh. The first harvest that is to be eaten is dedicated to Yahweh. It's made holy. It's dedicated to Yahweh, and it's eaten by the Kohanim and the Levites. And then only in the 5th year can you now start eating the produce of that tree. Okay, and that's called Orlah. Okay, let's get a little bit of commentary on it. So Robert Alter translates it as such. Okay, and when you come to the land and plant any fruit-bearing tree, you shall leave its fruit uncircumcised. 3 years it shall be uncircumcised to you. It shall not be eaten. And in 25, and in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be sacred, a jubilation before the Lord. So he translates it as Hilulim as jubilation. And in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, and its yield may be increased for you. I am Yahweh, your God. Okay, so what's going on here? Okay, let's read a little bit about it. So this analogy of fruit to foreskin, a little startling to the modern ear, includes both the idea of leaving a natural growth uncut and the notion, readily understandable in a society in which all male infants were circumcised, of something prohibited. These 3 verses reflect prudent or arboricultural practice rather than any ethical imperative. I disagree with that. Milgram, who has consulted horticulturalists, report that during the first 3 years, a tree is generally not thinned or pruned or harvested, but that the closed buds from which the image of foreskin would derive are plucked before the fruit emerges. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. So he's saying in the first 3 years, certain horticulturalists, so they're saying it's a horticultural reason, or Milgram, who's an expert in the book of Leviticus, is claiming it's a horticultural reason that trees are, that the buds are pruned, they're picked off before they open up, and he's saying that looks like that a bud looks kind of like an uncircumcised penis. I guess you can use your imagination for that one. Please don't use too much of your imagination for that one. And so therefore it has a horticultural point to it. Maybe it's possible, and maybe not. Maybe the idea is that there's also a sense of, okay, well, the tree, maybe it does have a horticultural idea to it. Okay, but then that wouldn't explain. Well, I guess it would explain. All right, we'll go with that then. All right, let's read on. So verse 24. So in the 4th year, we know that it's Kodesh. It's basically set aside for Yahweh. What is envisaged is a festival of first fruit, as we mentioned, to be offered in the sanctuary to God. Behind the term jubilation, some scholars have conjectured may lie an old practice of festive celebrations at harvest time, perhaps involving matchmaking or even orgies in the vineyards. Well, I don't know about that. But basically what it is, basically what it is, as we mentioned, is it's a, yeah, I've done that, Tony. Thank you. I've done it all. Basically what it is the 4th year becomes first fruits. It's dedicated to the Lord. It's dedicated to Yahweh. Okay. And then only in the 5th year is it now eaten. Okay, is it considered regular food? Okay, so we see a common theme that the first fruits of anything, we know that the first fruits of the barley harvest, for instance, are brought during Passover time as the Omer offering. First fruits of the wheat harvest during Shavuot, during the festival of weeks, and the fruits of, well, there's not an explicit offering there, that's just a celebration. But so for those two, right? And here we have the first fruits of a tree that has been planted. Okay. Its first viable harvest doesn't go to us as Israelites. It first is dedicated to Yahweh. We give him the first and we give him the best of everything. Okay. We give to him before we take for ourselves. And giving to him, by the way, doesn't mean just chucking it on a pile and letting it rot. It ultimately means that it's given to the Kohanim and the Levites, or in some cases the poor and the widows and the orphans and the Gerim. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to that issue. Okay. Any questions about that? About that commandment? Oh my God, this is really horrible. My cold I'm talking about, not the Torah. Okay, any questions? All right, so let's move on. Okay. Verse 26. Lo tuchlu al hadam, lo tinachashu velo ti'onenu. So these are types of magic or divination, types of wizardry, sorcery, or divination. Okay. So you shall not eat over the. Let me just translate it. Lo tuchlu al adam. Do not eat over the blood. Lo tinachashu. So they usually translate it. This is as carry out divination. Nobody knows exactly what it means. Okay, they translate as do not practice divination. Lo ti'onenu. They usually translate as I forgot the word in English, but let's see what it says here. Soothsaying. Okay. All right. Verse 26. Okay. You shall not eat over the blood. You shall not divine or nor interpret omens. So tinachashu, I once heard, I don't know if it's true or not. I'm not sure if anybody knows exactly what it is. But tinachashu means putting liquid in a wine glass and then reading the drops of liquid, or is it wine in a wine glass? I don't remember, but it has something to do with liquid in a glass. Okay, and we know this from look it up right now. But if we go all the way back to the book of Exodus, we know that one of the things that Joseph did to freak out his brothers, or to mess with his brothers, or to punish his brothers for what they had done, meaning sold them into slavery to Egypt, or sold them into slavery, eventually got taken down to Egypt. Then so they sold them to traveling Ishmaelites or Midianites, and and so many years later, when they come down, if you remember, Joseph has his assistant put his goblet in the backpack of Benjamin, and then sets it up, or does this on purpose, and basically sets them up so that they can be accused of stealing. And at one point he says, did you not know that I would find out the goblet is missing, or that I knew the goblet is missing? Because it's the goblet that let's even find the verse for a second. Once we're at it. It's here, Genesis chapter 44, verse 5. Okay, so we could just go to the English here. Genesis 44. Okay, now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house: fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. So it's a setup. Okay? So it's going to look like Benjamin stole Joseph's cup. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once. And when you catch up with them, say to them, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done. Okay, so, and just to finish the story here, in verse 6, when he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, "Why does my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves," etc. Okay? And they find it in Benjamin's sack. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack, in verse 12. Okay? So if we go to Genesis, if we go to the Hebrew, oh God. So we go to the Hebrew. Okay. Verse 5, speaking about the cup, it says, "Alot zeh asher yishte Adoni." Is this not, so this is the steward speaking to the brothers. Okay. "Alot zeh asher yishte Adoni." Is this not the one that my master drinks from? Asher yishte Adoni bo. Mihu nachesh yinachesh bo. And he also carries out divination using it or in it. Ha-re'otem asher asitem. What you've done is very bad. It's very evil. Okay. So it's the same word here. Okay. Lo tinachashu. So if we relate this back to Genesis chapter 44, verse 5, we see that it has something to do, or at least Joseph was using his special silver cup. I don't know if he really was, but he was saying that he was using it for divination. So that would imply somehow that it has to do with some kind of liquid in a cup where you read, let's say, I don't know, drops of wine in water, maybe drops of oil in wine. I don't remember exactly what it is. Okay. But that's where that idea comes from. Okay. This doesn't conclusively say or prove that that's exactly what the word tinachesh is. Okay. And here it is, nachesh yinachesh. Right there. Nachesh. Okay. But it certainly implies it. Okay. Veloti onenu. This is the other one. So tinachashu is being translated here as practice divination, and to onenu is being translated here as soothsaying. So it's possible, or I once learned many years ago that it's possible that this word is related to the word anan, ayin nun nun, ti onenu, and the word anan. The word anan means a cloud, and to onenu might therefore mean cloud reading. In other words, try to predict the future by interpreting the shapes of clouds. What is this? Oh God, here we go. All right, let's get rid of this person. Block user. Goodbye. Let's delete all the comments. Okay, that nonsense. So to onenu might be related to to reading clouds, to reading the shapes of clouds, like watching the clouds go by and saying, "Oh, that looks like, I don't know, a silver bar, so you're going to have a lot of silver in your future," or something like that. Okay, I'm not sure if anybody knows exactly what these two words mean, tenachashuv and onenu, but those are some possible explanations. Now, I could tell a funny story. So, in modern Hebrew, well, you've all heard of the word onanism, maybe, right? Onanism comes from the story of Er and Onan in, is it Genesis 35 thereabouts? I think. Let's see. No, it's after 36. It doesn't matter where. Okay, the story of Er and Onan. So we know that Onan Okay, I can't remember where it is right now. We know that Onan. So Jacob has three sons or two sons at first, Er and Onan. To make a long story short, the misinterpretation of the Torah is that Onan masturbated, he spilled his seed and was put to death, and therefore masturbation is one of the worst crimes you could possibly commit. Okay, there's absolutely no basis for this whatsoever in the Torah. But but in other religions, and when later on, when rabbinical Judaism became a very ascetic religion, they use this verse to kind of pretend or kind of say that this was the case. Although that's not what's going on there at all. That's for another time and another place. What's really going on there is something called levirate marriage or yibum. Onan was supposed to have a baby with Tamar, with his dead brother's wife, and he didn't. Instead, when it came time to finish the job, he spilled the seed on the floor, and in order to not give his dead brother a baby in his name. Okay. At any rate, so but because of that, because it was Onan, the name of the person is Onan with an aleph, not with an ayin. Here it's with an ayin. Did it, so that became the idea became that masturbation is extremely bad thing and it's illegal according to the Torah, which it's not, and not in the least. And and I remember, and so you have in the English the word onanism. Onanism is a fancy word for masturbation because of the story of Aaron Onan. So I remember I once asked a ultra orthodox Karaite friend of mine many years ago, can you find me, the story about Aaron Onan doesn't prove it. Can you find me a basis for in the Torah for proof that the Torah is prohibits us from carrying out that particular act, from masturbating, right? And he said yes. He pointed to this verse, Leviticus 19:26, and it says lo te'onenu. Okay. The only problem is that this is a completely different word. This is with an ayin, and there's absolutely nothing to do with the secondborn of, did I say Jacob? The secondborn of Yehuda, of Judah, Onan. That's with an aleph. This has to do most probably with, as I said, with the word cloud, anan, which means don't cloud read. But that was his proof that the Torah, this verse here, veloti onenu, was his proof that the Torah prohibits masturbation. Anyway, funny story from many years ago. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at. Let me close this out. See how Robert Alter translates this one. You shall not eat over the blood. You shall not divine, and you shall not interpret omens. Verse 26. Okay, the meaning of the sentence, represented quite literally in the translation, has been disputed, but the most plausible explanation is the one proposed by the medieval Hebrew exegete Nachmanides and by Rashbam before him. What is involved is a pagan rite of divination. Okay, I think so too. Okay, because clearly the context here is some kind of divination. Okay, so maybe what it is so lo tochlu al adam, don't eat over the blood. So maybe it has to do with sprinkling the blood of a dead animal and then try to read things into the pattern that's sprinkled. I know they do it with, I think it's livers, right? Animal livers. Read the liver. All of these things have to do with different types of divination, but as you can see, nobody knows 100% sure what they are. Okay, this would be the link with the second half of the verse, in which a ritual meal was consumed over a pit or large receptacle containing blood, perhaps with the idea that that spirits of the dead could be conjured up from the blood. So nobody really knows, right? But it's clear, and we see the link back to Genesis, that lo tenachashu, lo onenu, and we see this in other places. These all have to do with types of divination, and this is what the Torah is against. So whether it's tarot cards or reading tea leaves or reading animal livers or reading the stars, astrology. Okay, astrology would definitely fall into this category. I once actually I recently I don't know if it's the same guy, but many years ago I remember I fixed a computer for a guy that had here in Jerusalem that had just he had just made his website called Kosher Astrology, and I didn't want to insult him, and I guess I didn't want to lose the job, but I thought to myself, that's like saying kosher pig. Okay, astrology is completely prohibited by the Torah, is completely prohibited by this verse right here. Okay, any type of divination, any kind of predicting the future using signs. When I say signs, I don't mean signs that come from God. I mean signs in the heavens, signs on the earth, signs of any type that one could see around them. That is a form of divination, and it's completely prohibited. Okay. Alrighty. Any questions, any comments before we move on? Anybody? Yes, no? Okay, so let's move on. Verse 27. Okay, lo takifu pe'at roshchem ולא תשחית את פאת זקנך. So don't, takif would mean to round off, okay? To round off the corners of your head, and do not destroy the corners of your beard. And the context here, let's do 28 as well, okay? V'seret lenefesh lo titnu. Do not make a scratch. That's a bad translation. Let's see how they translate it here. A cutting. Do not make a cutting for any person. I'll explain what that means in a second. Really, any dead person. B'bisarchem, in your flesh. Tovet ka'aka lo titnu b'chem. And do not make any kind of tattoo writing upon yourselves. Ani Yahweh. Again, we have the Ani Yahweh. So typical of what we've seen in this chapter. Okay. So these all, verses 27 and 28, all seem to be speaking about mourning rituals. Okay. We know even to this day, I can't remember the name of the festival, but I think it's in Iran. There's a festival where once a year, in order to repent, people take razors and they slash themselves in the head with these razors, with these like flat razors, until blood gushes out of their head. Okay, so these are all types of that's not a mourning ritual per se, but repentance and mourning are kind of related. So these are all considered to be mourning rituals. Okay, we do know that people who do these things, they'd rip the hair out of their head, they would slash their flesh, they would tattoo themselves with the name of the dead. These are all ways of carrying out mourning rituals. Okay. So, and this is what the Torah is saying. The Torah is saying here, don't carry out these pagan mourning rituals. Okay. Don't rip the hair out of your head or your beard. Specifically says the edges is a corner. Okay. So the corners of your hair would be like over here, and your beard. Okay. So I guess around over here. Don't slash yourself with knives or razors. Don't tattoo yourself. Okay. And the way we know it's mourning rituals is because it says seret lenefesh. Okay. The key word here is lenefesh. So besides knowing that these were mourning rituals, okay, it says lenefesh. It means for a person, but the context here is for a dead person, for a person who's died. Okay. So we're talking about what were acceptable mourning rituals in the Torah. The first of all is rending one's clothes. Okay. Another one is letting one's Another one is letting one's hair out, which would either mean undoing their hair or taking off their head covering. Another one was for repentance, especially, was sitting in sackcloth and ash. Okay, these were acceptable repentance or mourning rituals, but these are not. Okay, destroying yourself, ripping the hair out of your head, slashing yourself, tattooing yourself, basically maiming yourself, either temporarily or permanently, is considered pagan. It's not considered an acceptable mourning ritual. Mourning, mourning. Okay. I already mentioned that at the beginning. It's so Yom Kippurim will start Sunday night, the night of Sunday, October 13th, and end the night of Monday, October 14th. Okay. All right. Let's see what we can get out of this. So, verse 27. You shall not round off the edge growth of your head, nor ruin the edge of your beard. No gash for the dead shall you make in your flesh, and no tattoo shall you make on yourselves. I am the Lord. Okay, let's get some commentary. Verse 27. So the word for edge growth, so this is round off the edge growth of your head. The word for edge growth, pe'ah, is the same one used in verse 9 for edge of the field, which is also not to be cut. This is an instance of what Mary Douglas characterizes as analogical thinking. This sort of bowl-shaped haircut does not appear to be the same thing as shaving the head, but it should be noted that shaving the head, tearing or mutilating the beard, and gashing one's body are all pagan mourning practices. Okay, so that's what we see there. It should also be noted that if you see the Orthodox Jews walking around and they have the long side curls, right? These things. Okay. Hello. Something. Okay, these side curls here. Okay. Right? Why did the Orthodox do this? They get it from this verse right here from Leviticus 19:27. Okay. לא תקיפו פאת ראשכם ולא תשחית את פאת זקניך. Don't round the corners of the hair on your head, of your head literally, and do not destroy the corners of your beard. So this area right here, they say that it's completely they disconnected from its context here, which is as a mourning ritual, and they say you're never ever allowed to cut this area of your head. Let me just bring myself up here, show it right. This area right here, this would be the corner of the hair or the corner of the head. This would be the corner of the beard. Okay, so this whole area here, you're never ever ever allowed to cut, and that's why they let the hair from this corner of the ears, they let it grow throughout their entire lives, and it grows down, and they never cut it, or maybe I think they never cut it, as a matter of fact. And if you go to a barber in Israel, all the barbers know, especially if they have a religious client, they will always ask, can I, do you want this area cut, or do you want it left alone? Even if I go into a barber in a couple of weeks to get my hair cut, they might ask me. I mean, I don't outwardly look religious because I don't walk around with a kippah on my head, but if I did, they would ask me, is it okay to cut the peyot? Is it okay to cut in this area? Okay. They know in Israel that some people might not let it grow all the way down as the side locks, but they won't cut it short over here. Okay. Or they'll just cut it. Sometimes they'll just cut it with a not with a razor, but with a machine for reasons I won't get into right now. Okay. But that all comes from this verse, but that's not what the verse is saying. The verse is saying that as a mourning ritual, don't start pulling the hair out of, or don't start shaving off the hair around here and the hair around here, the hair around the edges of your hair, right here around your ears, top of your ears, and the corners of your beard, right here, just below your ears. Okay, that was a pagan mourning ritual, and don't engage in that pagan mourning ritual. Okay, mourning, mourning. All right. Oh God. It's better like that. Let's see something here. Okay. So one second. Okay. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, for the dead, so verse 28. So the polyvalent, and polyvalent means having many values, right? Valent, value. Word nefesh often means person, but in some contexts refers to a dead person or corpse, and the implication of mourning here points to that meaning, right? For sure. Okay, we mentioned that. Okay, verse 29. אל תהלל את ביתך להזנותה ולא תזנה הארץ ומלאה הארץ זימה. So do not defile, do not profane. Okay. Do not profane your daughter, laznota, to turn her into a prostitute. Okay. In other words, don't sell your daughter into prostitution, or don't pimp your daughter out, to put it in very, very modern terms. Okay. Don't pimp out your daughter, or let her be a prostitute. Velotizna aretz, so that the land does not become not defiled. What's the word I'm looking for? Velotizna aretz. The land does not become prostituted. I don't know. It's a translation. How they translate here. Does not fall into harlotry. Okay. It really implies more like becomes defiled, or becomes full of defilement from prostitution. Umala aretz zim'ah, and lest the land become full of evil or wickedness. Okay, so basically, okay, we know, as in many traditional societies, even to this day, for sure, that women, our daughters, are not supposed to engage in prostitution. And in fact, in many traditional societies, including Torah society, daughters are expected to be virgins until the day they get married. Okay, their first husband is supposed to be their first sexual experience. Okay, and not before. But here we have an interesting concept, and we see this in a bunch of places throughout the Torah. So lo techalel et bitcha laznota. So do not defile your daughter to pimp her out or to allow her to be a prostitute. Velot is now audits, so that the land does not become prostituted. Okay, the land does not become full of prostitution or defiled through prostitution. And the land becomes full of evil. So this is a very I don't know if it's unique to the Torah, but it's definitely a theme that occurs throughout the Torah, that when we do abominations, abominable things such as this, it defiles the land. And when the land of Israel is defiled, eventually it eventually can no longer hold the people of Israel, or it can no longer hold its inhabitants, because the same could be applied to the Canaanites / Amorites. Oh God. And it vomits them out. Okay? So when we do things such as murder, such as allowing our daughters to be prostitutes, such as all kinds of other sexual depravity, okay, sex with animals, for instance, okay, this defiles, the idea in the Torah is it defiles the land of Israel, defiles the land itself, and when the land becomes defiled enough, it vomits out. It's almost like if you eat bad food, right? If you eat something that's rancid and you eat it enough, eventually you're going to vomit that back out. And that is the concept, or that's the analogy that's used for the land of Israel, that if it swallows, quote unquote, enough abomination and enough depravity, then eventually it can't hold it in anymore, and it vomits out its inhabitants. So just as the Canaanites were vomited out for all of their depravity, as we saw in Leviticus 18, the previous chapter, and we'll see again in Leviticus 20. So if the Israelites start engaging in the same activities that the Canaanites engaged in, then they themselves will be vomited out of the land. And in fact, that's in the end what happens. That's what happens in the northern kingdom by the Assyrians when they exile the Israelites. In, I think, the year around 700 BCE, if my memory serves me correctly, and that's what happens in the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judea, when the Babylonians in 581 BCE, if I'm not mistaken, thereabouts, destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple, break down the walls of Jerusalem, and exile the Jews to Babylon. Okay? Contaminate. There we go. That's a good word. Exactly. Perfect word, Mani and Anna. The land becomes contaminated. Okay, and that actually here, Al Techalel et Bitcha, it is Ne Aretz. It's contaminated. Yeah, I like that translation. Okay. Lot is Ne Aretz, Mala Aretz Zima. Maybe Zima we can translate as evil or contamination. I like that. Okay. Let's see here what Robert Alter has to say. Nothing. Let's go on. Verse 30. Et Shabbatai tishmeru, v'mikdashi tira'u ani Yahweh. Keep my Shabbats and fear my sanctuary, ani Yahweh. So we saw that throughout chapter 19, and I'm not going to go back through it right now, but we saw that a bunch of the 10 Commandments were mentioned, right? That the 10 Commandments were rehashed. For instance, where was it? Here, verse 11, Lo tignovu, do not steal. Okay? Or here, let's see, verse 3, Ish imo aviu tira'u. Each person, every person should fear his mother and his father. And keep my Shabbats. Okay? So we see that throughout chapter 19, the 10 Commandments, or some of the 10 Commandments, I don't know about all of them, are interspersed. And we have that right here. Okay, the Sabbath is mentioned once again. Keep my Sabbaths. It's the fourth commandment. Miktashit yira'u ani Yahweh. And fear my mikdash. What does that mean, fear my mikdash? Okay, so first of all, I would like to point out that this is not my own idea, but Shabtotai, keep my Sabbaths. That's a time. That's once a week, every seventh day. And fear my sanctuary, that's a place. So we have a time mentioned and a place mentioned. Okay, and we have this concept both in places and in times. What are the more holy days of the year? I'm sorry, what's closer to holiness? So in terms of place, the closer we get to the sanctuary, okay, so you could say outside the land of Israel is the least holy. It doesn't mean it's unholy. It just doesn't mean it means it doesn't have a specific holiness to it. The land of Israel has a higher level of holiness. Jerusalem, which was eventually chosen at the end of the book of 2 Samuel by God, has a higher level of holiness. Then Mount Moriah has a higher level of holiness. The courtyard of the temple has a even higher. Okay. Then the tent of meeting has an even higher level of holiness. And then the tent of meeting is divided into two sections: the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kedoshim, the holy area, and the Holy of Holies. So as you get closer into, right, as you move further and further into the inner sanctuary, then the holiness level gets higher. And also in terms of days, in terms of time, we have the 6 days of the week. They're not unholy, they're just average, they're chol. They're just run of the mill. Okay, you do your tasks, and it doesn't mean that they're bad days. It could be very beautiful, special days, but they don't have the same holiness as Sabbath does. And Sabbath doesn't have the same holiness as Yom Kippurim. Okay, because on Yom Kippurim, that's when the Kohen Gadol enters into that inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, to perform his rituals. We saw his rituals as we saw in Leviticus chapter 16, just a couple of chapters ago. Okay, so time is mentioned and place is mentioned. Okay, and why does it say fear my sanctuary? And the idea of fearing the sanctuary, I think, is pretty clear. And it means that to have enough fear of it or have enough regard for it that you're very careful with not defiling it with ritual impurity, with kudis, right, with tu'umah, and B, to follow all of the laws of the sacrifices, the incense, all of the stuff, all of the ritualistic, the quote unquote cultic service of Yahweh, or the ritualistic of service of Yahweh, that's laid down in great detail, both in Exodus, in terms of, let's say, the clothing of the Kohanim, and in Leviticus, in terms of the details of the sacrificial system, etc. So to make sure that all of these laws are followed, and in particular to make sure that ritual impurity does not come in contact with the mikdash, with the sanctuary. We know that, as we discussed, as we learned throughout the book of Leviticus, we know that that's a big no-no, right? That's the whole idea of all of these laws of ritual purity and ritual impurity, so that ritual impurity doesn't come in contact with the mikdash, with the sanctuary, with the temple. Okay, so that's what it means. Fear, have enough fear of it. Okay, meaning fear the consequences of what would happen if you defile the sanctuary of Yahweh. The analogy I always like to give is going to the White House. Okay, if you're invited to the White House, well, with this Joe Biden guy in there, it doesn't really matter, I guess. But if you had a real president in there like Donald Trump, then if you were invited to the White House, and you showed up in sandals and shorts, and I guess people do that in this day and age, right? Wasn't there a couple of trannies that even showed up? But at any rate, if you show up in sandals and shorts, and a t-shirt for a state dinner, and let's say on top of it, you just stepped in I don't know, dog crap, and you trudged the dog crap into the White House, then you're not having the proper respect. You're not having the proper fear of the White House. It's more than respect. Okay, it's almost like a fear. Respect and fear kind of do go together. Just like you should fear your teacher. Okay, not in a bad way, but in a good way, right? You should have a certain amount of fear. Children should have a certain amount of fear of their teachers. They should have a certain amount of fear of their parents. They should have a certain amount of fears. I don't know, if they're learning martial arts, of their martial arts teacher, their sensei. Okay, fear is a healthy part of a relationship between student teacher, child parent, etc. Okay, and that's the idea here. It's not enough for us to just have a nice respect, but we should fear. There should be a certain amount of fear for God and His sanctuary, that we're so careful. We're because of this fear, we're careful not to walk in there in a state of impurity, or not to violate any of the rules that surround it, or that are involved with it. Okay. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Trannies and cocaine are normal now for the White House. Yeah, you could say that again. Okay. Any comments from Robert Alter on this one? No. Verse 31. Wow, we might actually get through the end of Leviticus if we're good. I mean, Leviticus 19 if we're good. I'm going to try. I have another 15 minutes or so, and then I have to go. Atifnu el ha'ovot ve'el ha'yid'onim an tivakshu v'tam'ah behem ani Yahweh Elohechem. So do not turn to the... Okay, so the ovot... Oh, boy. So let's see how they translate it here. Mediums, Yidonim, they usually translate as familiar spirits. Al tivakshu v'tam'ah behem ani Yahweh Elohechem. So do not turn to the mediums and to the familiar spirits, and the familiar spirits do not seek out in order to be defiled by them. Ani Yahweh Elohechem. So what is this speaking about? This is speaking about this is talking about speaking with the dead. Okay, so an ov sometimes will translate as a witch, sometimes as a medium. It's basically someone who is able to raise the dead, or to make contact with the dead, and get information from the dead. We have the famous story in, I think it's 1 Samuel chapter 18, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. With Saul, no, it's after this. 21, is it then? No, it's after this. So they usually call her the Witch of Endor. First book of Samuel. Samuel 28. 1 Samuel 28. So the Witch of Endor. So Shaul maybe we should end on the story of the Witch of Endor, because it's such an important and interesting story, and it'll give us a chance to go into other parts of the Tanakh. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll continue in Leviticus 19. There's no rush. And let's talk about the Witch of Endor. So you can follow along in English. I'll just read in the Hebrew. Where'd it go? Okay. So follow along in your English. I'm just going to read in the Hebrew. Maybe I'll do a quick translation here and there. Vayhi biyamim hahem wa yikpatzu lishtim et machanehem tzava lelachem b'Yisrael vayomer Achish el David yada yadoa teda ki iti tze b'machaneh ata ve'anshecha. Verse 2. ויאמר דוד אל אחיש, לכן אתה תדע את אשר יעשה עבדך. ויאמר אחיש אל דוד, לכן שומר לראשי השמחה כל הימים. Shmuel mate, verse 3, this is 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. Shmuel mate, Samuel had died. ויספדו לו כל ישראל, ויקברוהו ברמה, בעירו, ושאול הסיר האובות, ואת הידעונים מהארץ. So here, notice in verse 3, it says Shaul had gotten rid of the ovot, the mediums, and the yidonim, the familiar spirits, me'aretz. So this is the same two words that are mentioned here in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31. Do not turn to the ovot, the mediums, and the yidonim, the familiar spirits. Here we have Samuel had gotten rid of the ovot, the mediums, and the yidonim, the familiar spirits, from the land. But Samuel's dead. Samuel was his go-to. And now Saul, who's still king of Israel at this point, has trouble with the Philistines. Okay? Verse 4, V'yikbatzu Philishtim, V'yavo Yahanu, B'shunem, V'yikbotz Shaul, et kol Yisrael, V'yahanu B'Gilboa. Verse 5, so Shaul gathers together the armies of Israel. Verses 5 and 6, V'yar Shaul et machane Philishtim, V'yir'ah, V'yicharad libo me'od. So Shaul sees the huge camp of the Philistines and becomes fearful. V'yish'al Shaul Yahweh v'lo anahu Yahweh. So Shaul inquired of Yahweh, and Yahweh did not answer him. Gam b'chalomot, gam be'urim, gam be'nivi'im. Neither through dreams, neither through the Urim and Tumim. Spoke about that in the book of Exodus. Those are the oracular devices that are somehow connected to the ephod. Gam be'nivi'im, and not by the prophets. So Shaul sees the camp of the Philistines camped against him. Okay. Second. In this place, Shunem. Okay. And he's scared. And he tries to get answers from God, but God is not answering him. Verse 7. Vayomer Shaul le'avadao bakshu li eshet ba'alat ov. So now Shaul makes a big mistake, and this mistake is going to cost him his life and his son's life. Shaul says to his servants, find me a medium. Find me someone who can speak to the dead. Shaul is desperate. Shaul is King Saul. King Saul is desperate. He's not getting answers. His go-to prophet Samuel has just died. God is not speaking to him, not through dreams, not through the Urim and Tumim, not through the other prophets. And now Shaul sees the camp of the Philistines. He's terrified, and he becomes desperate. He lacks faith in Yahweh. He becomes desperate, and he asks his servants to find him a medium, someone who could speak to the dead. Why? Let's find out. Welcha eleha ve'edrasha ba vayomru avadav elav hine eshet ba'alat ov be'endor. So he's gonna go, and he's gonna speak. He's gonna speak to the dead, and we'll see who exactly, to get answers, to get the answers he needs. In other words, should he go out against the Philistines, he needs some kind of reassurance that Yahweh is with him in this battle. Okay, so his servants tell him that there is, in fact, an ov, a medium. Again, that's the same word that we see here in Leviticus 19, right here, verse 31. Ovot, the mediums. Okay, so his servants tell him there is a medium in a place called Endor. Verse 8. But we saw earlier that Saul had gotten rid of all the mediums, all the ovot and all the yidonim, all the mediums and all the familiar spirits. ויתחפש שאול וילבש בגדים אחרים וילך הוא שני אנשים עמו, יבוא אל האישה לילה, ויאמר, כשמי נא לי בעוב, ועלי לי את אשר אומר אליך. So basically, Shaul dresses up, he disguises himself, goes with two other people, and he comes to this woman, and he says, do magic for me, do wizardry for me. Kisami, nali, for me, ba'ov. So here, we won't get into the details, but it says, do magic for me with the ov, with the mediums. Okay, it gives us some hint as maybe what the word ov means exactly. At any rate, halili et asher omar elecha, raise up for me whoever I tell you. Verse 9, vatomer ha'isha elau, hine ata ידעת את אשר עשה שאול, אשר הכרית את העובות ואת הידעוני מן הארץ, ולמה אתה מתנקש בנפשי להמיתני? So this lady says, listen, you know what King Saul, she doesn't recognize that it's King Saul. Remember, King Saul dressed up here as he disguised himself, he dressed up in different clothes. And she says to him, you know what Shaul did, what King Saul did, he got rid of all the mediums and all the familiar spirits, basically all the people who hold seances and contact the dead. And why are you going to entrap me and have me put to death, right? In other words, he knows, or in other words, she knows that what she's doing is illegal, that Shaul has gotten, she's lucky to be alive. Shaul has gotten rid of all of the people who speak to the dead. Verse 10, Shabala Shaul b'Yahweh. Emor chai Yahweh im yikre, I'm sorry, what does it say? Yikre avon b'davar hazeh. So Shaul now actually takes an oath in the name of Yahweh. The formula for an oath is chai. I won't say it because I don't want to take an oath. Well, I mean, God's not stupid. He knows I'm not taking an oath. But chai Yahweh means as Yahweh lives. That is the formula for taking an oath in the name of a deity, or in this case, in the name of Yahweh. So Shaul is actually swearing on the name of Yahweh that nothing is going to happen to this woman. So do you realize how crazy this is? Shaul is going to someone who knows how to contact the dead, which is completely illegal according to the Torah. Shaul himself has already gotten rid of all of these diviners, these witches, okay? And now he's coming to her and swearing in the name of Yahweh that nothing is going to happen to her if she does what he's asking her to do. Okay, it's an absurd situation. Let's check and see if there are any comments or anything. Verse 11, Vatomer ha'isha et mi a'alelach. So the woman, okay, I'll read the whole thing. But Yomer et Shmuel alili. So he asked the woman to raise up who? Shmuel, Samuel, the prophet that just died. Oh my God. ותראה האישה את שמואל, ותזעק בקול גדול, ותאמר האישה אל שאול, לאמור למה רימיתני ותא שאול. And so the woman raises up, Samuel, Shmuel, the prophet, and when he sees her, he says, why did you lie to me? You're Shaul. You're King Saul. ויאמר לה המלך, אל תראי, כי מה ראית, ותאמר, האישה, I'm sorry, מה ראית? ותאמר האישה אל שאול, אלוהים ראיתי, עולים מן הארץ. And the king, now the gig is up. This witch of Endor knows that it's King Saul. So the king says to her, what did you see? And she says, I saw God rising up from the earth. Elohim, the gods, maybe. Remember, she's a pagan. Some kind of godlike creature, I think they usually translate it as. I'll translate it as a godlike creature. It literally means a god rising up from the earth. Verse 14, Wayomer la ma ta'oru. I'm sorry, ma ta'aro. ותאמר איש זקן עולה, והוא עוטה מעיל, וידע שאול כי שמואל הוא, ויקוד אפיים ארצה וישתחו. So, he says to her, so King Saul says to the witch, the witch of Endor, what does he look like? And she says, Ish Zaken, he was an old man, and he had a robe wrapped around him. And Shaul knew immediately that this was Samuel, this was Shmuel. And he bowed down. He bowed down with his face touching the ground, and he prostrated himself. Verse 15. Let's check in here. Wayomer Shmuel el Shaul, and now Samuel is speaking to Shaul. Lama hirgaztani la'alot oti. Why have you disturbed me? Why have you shaken me out of my sleep to bring me up? Wayomer Shaul Tsar li ma'od. And Saul said, Tsar li ma'od, I'm in big trouble. Uflishtim nilchamim bi, because the Philistines are fighting against me, are about to fight against me. Elohim sar me'alai, and God has left me. Velo anani od biyad nevi'im gam bechalomot, and nobody's answered me, not the prophets, not in dreams. Wa ikra elecha lehodi aini ma eraseh. And so I've called you so that you could tell me, so you can make known to me what I should do. That's what Saul tells Samuel. Verse 16, Wayomer Shmuel v'lama tishaleni u'Yahweh sar me'alecha wahi arecha. So Samuel says, why are you asking me, seeing that God has already removed himself from you? God has already left you. Second. Okay. Verse 17. Vayas Yahweh lo kasher diber biyadi. Why is this thing? Just 1 second, please. Vayas Yahweh lo kasher diber biyadi. Vayikra Yahweh. 1 second, please. ויעש יהוה לו כאשר דיבר בידי, ויקרא יהוה את הממלכה מידיך, ויתנה לרעך לדוד. And 1 second, please. And Yahweh has done to you as he spoke. Okay, Yahweh has ripped the kingdom away from your hands and has given it to your fellow man, to your fellow man, to David. In other words, God has already left you. Okay, you're not in his good favors anymore. Okay, verse 18. Kasher lo shamata b'kol Yahweh v'lo asita charon apo, because you did not listen to the voice of Yahweh and you did not execute his fury ba'amalek. And this is a story that we see earlier, where Shaul spares the life of the king of Amalek. And that's why Yahweh did this to you. That's why God took the kingdom away from you, gave it to David, and has left you. He doesn't want anything more to do with you. And therefore, Yahweh is also going to give your people Israel into the hands of the Philistines. Machar ata uvanecha aimi. And tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me, meaning you're going to die. Gam et machane Yisrael yiten Yahweh biyad Filishtim. And the entire and also the camp of Israel, Yahweh is going to hand over to the Philistines. So that's it. This is what happens. Shaul makes the mistake of going to Saul, makes the mistake of going to Samuel to get answers, and does it completely in the wrong way by going to this witch of Endor. And so the answer is tomorrow when you go to battle with the Philistines tomorrow, they're going to defeat Israel. The entire camp of Israel is going to be handed over to the hands of Philistines, and you and your sons are going to be with me, Samuel says. In other words, you're going to die tomorrow. And that's exactly what happens. Okay? We can read to the rest very briefly. I have to go in just a minute. וימהר שאול ויפול מלוא קומתו ארצה, and Shaul, in his haste, his entire body fell to the floor, and he was very tall, Shaul. וירא מאוד מדברי שמואל, and he feared very much from the words of Shmuel. גם כוח לא היה בו, כי לא אכל לחם כל היום וכל הלילה. And he had no strength left because he hadn't eaten all day and all night. Verse 21. ותבוא האישה אל שאול, תראה כי נבהל מאוד. So the woman, meaning this witch of Endor, the one who had made contact, who had raised up Samuel, went over to Shaul, ותראה כי נבהל מאוד, because he saw that he was freaking out, that he was in a very bad state. ותאמר אליו, הנה שמעה שפחתך בקולך. And she said to him, your servant, meaning this is the witch speaking, your servant, shama bekolcha, bekolecha, I've heard your voice, vasim nafshi bekapi, and I've literally placed myself in my hand, but I think it means like put my hand on my face or something like that, perhaps. V'shma et divarecha asher dibata elai. No, Simna Shiba Kapi, I think it means I took my life in my own hands, meaning I risked myself by doing what you asked me. Shema Devarecha, and I listened to your request, your words, Asher Dibat Elai, which you spoke to me. So now she's worried that maybe she's going to get killed because she did what she wasn't supposed to do. Vata Shema Na Gam Ata Bekol Shifchatecha. Now listen, please, to the voice of your servant. This is the witch of Endor speaking. Vasima Lefanecha Pat Lechem, and let me give you a little bit of bread. That you should eat and have a little bit of strength before you go on your way, before you go on your journey. Verse 23, and he said, I will not eat. Saul is really, he's in a bad state right now, psychologically and spiritually. Okay, I will not eat. But his servants pressed him to do so. V'gama isha, and also the woman, the witch of Endor, wishma the kolam yakam me'aretz v'yeshev elamita. And so he listened and to their voice, and he eventually got up from the ground that he was lying on and sat down on the bed. At any rate, we'll just finish it. We only have another 2 verses. Isha egel marbek. So the woman had an egel. An egel is a calf, a fattened calf in the house. V'timaher v'tiz b'chehu, and she hurried and slaughtered it. V'tikach kemach what talash what tofehu matzot, and she took flour, and she kneaded it, and she baked unleavened bread, matzot. Tagesh lifnei Shaul, and she served it to Shaul, v'lifnei avadav, and to his servants, v'yochelu, and they ate. V'yakumu v'yerchu b'laylahu, and they got up and they left that night. To make a long story short, the next day, in 1 Samuel 15, in 1 Samuel chapter 29, Shaul, I think it's in this chapter, but at any rate, Shaul then goes and fights. Israel fights against the Philistines, and indeed, what was predicted happens. Shaul dies in battle, and his son Jonathan, also dies in battle, as was predicted by the witch of Endor. So, what's the point here? The point is, it says in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31, "Atifnu el avot ve'el yidonim, ativakshu, v'tama behem ani Yahweh Elohechem." So, do not turn to the mediums, the people who can raise up the dead to get answers from the dead, ve'el yidonim, and to the familiar spirits. Nobody knows exactly what that means, but it also has to do with, again, speaking to the dead, probably. Ativakshu, okay, do not seek out the familiar spirits, to become contaminated, to become defiled by them. Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh, your God. Okay, so if you want answers, according to the Torah, according to the Tanakh, if you want answers, where do you get the answers from? You don't get it from reading wine drops in a cup. You don't get it from looking at the clouds. You don't get it from tarot cards. You don't get it from reading animal livers. You don't get it from reading tea leaves. You don't get it by raising up the dead and asking them. Okay, you get it from one place and one place only, and that's from Yahweh. And that can come. The answers can come to you either in a dream, or a vision, or through the prophets. Okay, but these are the only legitimate ways in the Torah that one could get answers from the above and beyond, from the beyond. Okay, only directly from Yahweh, and only through a dream or through a prophet. Shaul, in his desperation and in his fear of the Philistines and in his lack of faith of Yahweh, in his desperation, he saw that the prophets weren't answering him. He saw that he wasn't having any dreams, that Yahweh was not giving him an answer. So in his fear and in his desperation and in his lack of faith of Yahweh, he went to the witch of Endor. He went to this medium of Endor, and he asked her to raise up Samuel so that he can ask Samuel who had already died, he can ask a dead person what to do, thereby violating Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31. And with that, I think we'll bring the study to an end. Any final comments? Any comments or any questions? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shabbat Shalom Mishpacha, Shabbat Shalom Gam Adonia Hanan Yehuda. Okay. We're going to end it here. I thank you for having the patience to put up with my cold. I hope it's gone by next week. You never know with these things. But I think it's been a really good study. We'll continue next week. I guess we're still going to be in Leviticus 19, but that's okay. No rush. Maybe next week we'll finish Leviticus 19. Let me just make a note for myself that we finished through verse 31. 1 second, please. One second. Okay. And I remind everybody that right now is Yom HaTeruah. It began last night, Friday night at sunset. It will end tonight at maximal darkness, nightfall. And I wish everybody a Yom Teruah Sameach. I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. We'll pick it up again, Be'ezrat Yahweh. With the help of Yahweh, we'll pick it up again next week. Remember that next Sunday night, October the 13th at sunset, begins the fast of Yom Kippurim, and that will last until nightfall or maximal darkness on Monday, the 14th of October. So thank you all for joining me. Sorry about the cold. Sorry for myself as well that I have this horrible cold. And I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, a Yom Teruah Sameach, and a Shavua Tov, depending on where you are in the world. I'm in a bit of a rush. I have to get to a meal that I was invited to, so I'm not going to go out with any music. I'm just going to say goodbye right now. So I thank you all for joining me. Talk to you again soon.